Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris and Beverley Ann.
Hello everyone and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast with myself, Chris Tuck, and my co-host
Beverley Ann. Hello.
So we have got an amazing guest today. Her name is Dr Theresa Redmond, BA Hons, PGCE, MSc, PhD. Theresa, what does all of that mean?
I think it probably sounds much more impressive than it really is. Hello.
Sounds amazing.
BA Honours is an undergraduate degree. With honours means it's just an extra level of that degree. PGC is my teaching qualification. MSc is a Masters in Science. I've got a Masters in Investigative Psychology. And the PhD is a doctorate degree, which is in sociology and social anthropology. It just trips off the tongue.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's all they are. I wasn't actually expecting you to read it out.
I know. Expect the unexpected in this podcast. So
okay, that makes me feel
let me take back over. So you are an associate professor at the International Policing and Public Protection Research Institute, which again just trips off the tongue.
Yeah.
IPPRI at Anglia Ruskin University. You are a subject specialist in child sexual abuse and exploitation, known as CSAE, vulnerability and gender-based violence. You have extensive experience and expertise in the field as both a frontline practitioner and researcher, and you're currently leading IPPRI research projects on improving responses to and support for the families of online CSA suspects and offenders, research wellbeing, working collaboratively with victim and survivors of CSA, and CSAE police officer wellbeing. So there's so much that you're doing and so much for us to cover in a little while.
Yeah.
But you was also a researcher for the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse for 2 years, involved in research in child sexual abuse in ethnic minority communities, in schools and in sports settings. You were also an assistant facilitator for the ICSA Truth Project. Before becoming a researcher, you worked for 10 years as a frontline practitioner in social care with children and young people at risk of or experiencing child sexual abuse and exploitation. You then become a social sciences teacher for 12 years, the head of a department in a large secondary school, with a significant pastoral role supporting mental health and well-being of students. You are a feminist and you've got lived experience of sexual violence. So, wow.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody else.
No, for me, it sounded like I was doing, you know, that Red Book program. What this is your life.
Have you got some secret guests lined up for me?
No. You are our guest today, and flipping phenomenal is what I'm going to say.
Can I just say there, Chris, before we continue? Obviously, I haven't had the honour of meeting Theresa before today, but obviously doing my research and looking up Dr. Theresa Redmond, I was like, oh, wow. And why do we do that? We always think, like, when it's someone else, we're like, wow. But when it's ourselves, it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I did that.
I agree. We do that. I don't know. It annoys when other people do it and then I do it myself.
It's that imposter syndrome, isn't it, Tree?
It is, and I think we're kind of
a little bit.
I've got I'm full of it. I think it's about how you perceive yourself from being a child and like what you were told you can and can't do, whether that's been explicitly or implicitly. I got a lot of negative messages about myself and also being a girl. So I think that even though I really have to fight hard against it, it's still there, you know, that thing. It's almost like an instinctive default position, which really is really annoying. But also as a driver, it has driven me to do things to overcome that. So maybe it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
But a lot of victim and survivors and individuals that have suffered harm go through the same stuff that we're just sharing right now.
Totally, totally. It's actually, I think it's probably quite an unresearched area, you know.
Well, it's an area that I'm particularly interested in because, you know, that messaging of our small child and even our teenage, you know, that's something I'm really passionate about, and it is all part of us.
It is. And I think when bad things happen, whatever they are, and I know we all know there's all different types of abuse, and I've experienced quite a few of them. I think whatever harm it is, because it's happened to you, you think that because something bad happens to you as a child, you think you're bad. I really remember thinking, there's something about me that's bringing out something really bad in people. And I can remember thinking that in my adult years as well, you know. So it's like those thoughts, they stick, don't they? It takes a lot of unpicking.
So profound, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's so profound, isn't it? It's like that stick of rock where you've got Blackpool, for instance, embedded in the rock. That's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, it does.
And then as an adult, especially working in this field, takes an enormous amount of tenacity, courage, determination, because you hear the other messages about not being heard as a child, and you hear, you know, we all hear very negative views of people that make reports against someone, and that embeds those thoughts as a child. So, you know, that's why we are so respectful and honoured to have guests such as yourself, because we ourselves understand that drive, that determination, but also that importance of being able to look after ourselves and the impact it has, whether we want it or not.
Yeah, it is definitely a driver. I think, like for me, working with victims and survivors, you know, it's my own experience of also kind of disclosing things and not being believed, or it being really, really horrendously minimized, like, you know, and all the victim blaming stuff. But I think the other side of working with them, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but it's really empowering. Has been really empowering for me. It's made me realize my own experience in a much more clear way. I've been able to name the things that have happened to me, whereas I haven't been able to do that for a long time. Even though I've worked in this space, it's only really been the last 5 years that I've been able to actually do that, which is quite a brutal experience. But I've learned, that's what I've learned. And I think, you know, I'm not altruistic. I'm not, you know, I believe passionately in supporting people and trying to do the best and never creating harm and all those sorts of things. But actually, I have to recognize I get something out of that. I have got something out of that as well, you know. So it is reciprocity, I suppose. It's reciprocal.
I'm glad you said that word. I'm not even going there.
Took a bit of a deep breath before I said it.
No, I'm not even going to say it either. So, Tree, let's just go back a little bit and just share what you're comfortable with sharing. What was life like growing up for you at a top level?
Well, we were very working class. We were pretty poor at times. My dad worked away a lot and he drank a lot of the time, yet managed to work. My mum struggled with all of that, I think, and struggled with certain issues in the family, you know, different types of things. So it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. They divorced when I was 10 or 11. That was devastating to me. I kind of had to unpick that in my sort of 20s and 30s, how much that actually did impact me. And actually, when my mum sat me down and said, we're getting divorced, I'd never heard that word before. I didn't understand what it meant. I just knew something really bad was happening. And I think, like, we just sort of toss divorce around, don't we? Like, it's just everyone's doing it, but actually it's incredibly impactful on families and particularly on children. So yeah, and I passed my 11+, went to a grammar school, did not fit in. maybe I did have a bit of a chip on my working class shoulder, but I just saw how different people lived differently to us and how some people treated me differently because I came from a different background. I came from a really pretty rough council estate. Yes, I didn't do very well at school. I was probably seen as gobby and tough. But I wasn't. I was actually probably pretty frightened and scared a lot of the time. But I was kind of out to shock and agitate. So I did put myself out there and to get on people's nerves, really. So basically I had to redo a lot of my education when I started getting myself together. To redo my A-levels. And then I did my first degree when I was 25. I did my master's. God, I don't know. Must have been in my I did my teacher's qualification first in my 30s. And I'm telling you the ages because it took me this long to believe that I could do these things. I did my master's when I was in my early 40s and my PhD when I was in my late 40s. So I obviously had always had those abilities, but I've never, ever believed any of that until sort of my late 20s, really. And that is another impact of just experiencing harm. I'm going to call it harm as a child and as a teenager. So yeah, I don't think as a late developer, it just took me a long time to kind of break out from all the. We'll have to swear on this podcast or not?
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to say like all the shit that I think other people
we can say
on
that
me.
word.
Yeah.
I felt like I had to kind of break out of it. It was very slow, a bit like a zombie coming out of a grave or something. But yeah, so that's why I'm telling you the ages, because that's just another layer of impact.
And it's important.
Yeah. Because people think, some victim and survivors, I should say, that watch this podcast and professionals think that some of us have got our shit together and it's all right for us, but they don't understand that we've all struggled. We've all struggled in different ways, and we've just now found ourselves that we can be and do what we're doing. And it's come at a cost, and it comes from perseverance, and it comes from just being further on in our journey than where they may be. That's all it is. There's nothing special about any one of us. It is just that we've got to where we've got to because of the impact on us and the way that it's driven us to get to where we are and what we're doing. That's it.
Yeah, and we're still learning.
Exactly. I think for me, I kind of see it as I had, let's say, 18 years of really sort of negative messaging, quite bad experiences, that you internalize as a child, and you can't articulate it, and you don't have a psychology degree, or you're not getting any other messages from other adults around you, and there's a whole kind of cultural thing around being a girl, particularly in the 70s and 80s, and also before, but my experience was 70s and 80s. And I've kind of feel like I've then spent the next 80, I'm 52 now, so I can't do math, so however long that is, unpicking those messages and building evidence to prove that I'm not shit. Yeah. It isn't me.
Absolutely, Theresa.
And collect the evidence to have to counter narrative against the one you kind of grew up around. You're constrained by it. So you have to break it out, I think. That's how I feel I've done it. I haven't done that consciously. That's what happened.
But finding that evidence is so important. So important. And I don't mind sharing, at 60, I've completed my first year at uni. Yes. And I'm about to have assessment for dyslexia. Right. So I didn't realise. And so it's a learning curve each step we take. Chris, you're always learning things going along as well, aren't you? And I've done that just as if she's about to have a drink of water. Sorry, Chris. But, it's good for people to hear the reality. Age is a privilege, but also it doesn't mean to say that just because you were unable to not do something earlier, that you can do it whenever you're ready in your own experience.
Exactly. And I think that's actually really important to sort of I am proud of myself for doing that. I do feel like I've done that. No one's given me anything. You know, I have that sense of I've done this and it's been hard. And it's not like I can remember like in the year 2000, you know, when we were like, it was like a big thing when I was 15 and I was about 30, 32 or something, 29, something like that. As I said, I'm rubbish at maths. And I can remember sitting around with my friends and saying, what would we be like in the year 2000, you know, and they had the Pulp song out and all these things. And I thought, I'm going to be so sorted. I will be so sorted by then. Anyway, I wasn't. And, you know, I wasn't at 40 and I'm still not at 50. You know, I'm just not. And I think what I've learned now is I don't need to be. I just need to be trying and moving forward all the time, whatever that looks like.
And I think,
Absolutely.
many people sort of who've suffered harm and now living with the trauma impact of all of that, I often hear, when's this all going to be over? When is it I'm going to be living my life? When is it I'm not going to be impacted by all of this stuff? When is it, and why do I have to do the bloody work? I'm so angry that I've got to do all of this stuff for me. Like, you know, I didn't want any of this. I don't want to be living my life like this. And for me, it's just like, you know that you've moved through the hard stuff when you can find some peace in just being you on a day-to-day basis. And even if it's not all day, moments in that day where you can just go, actually, life is okay. I'm actually living this bit. I'm actually laughing. I'm actually enjoying this. You know, it's not always such a hard slog. And I think a lot of people need to come to that realization that it is not an end destination. It's the journey. And if you truly want to live your life, accepting that and acknowledging that, and a lot of us don't get there.
No, I think you're right. I really agree. I think that, you know, there's all kinds of like, excuse me, like sort of semi-cheesy quotes and things you can come about, you know, life's the journey, it's the step, blah, blah, blah. But actually all of that is true. And I think it's true for everybody, whatever anyone's experience is, you know.
Oh, Tree's frozen for a moment. She's back. There she is.
Sorry. There are lots of people who've experienced worse harms than I have and people who've experienced less harms, but it doesn't matter in terms of, because it's not a competition of harms, but it's about, we're all going through that. And I've had periods of peace, you know, years of it. And then I've had periods of what just feel like struggle and anguish. And I can't always pinpoint where they are, but I know one thing, and that is that you have to carry on. I have to carry on. You know, you just have to put the next foot forward. You do the next right thing, whatever that is. And it could just literally be getting out of bed some days. I don't know. But so I think, you know, I'm grateful in lots of ways for my experiences because I do like who I am today. And I do believe that I've been shaped in a good way by bad things.
Yes.
And, you know, and I'm not like in this place of Zen resolution. I'm really not, you know, I'm struggling today, but there are fundamentals that I hold on to really tightly, I think. And that's one of them, you know, that actually I am okay. Fundamentally, I am okay. It's not me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But there are those victim survivors, individuals that have undergone harm, who are not even in that place, unfortunately. They still believe deep down that there is something at the core that they're wrong, they're at fault, they're to blame. And that's when all that layer of shame comes into the picture. And there's all of that unpicking to do. And as I've said, we've probably, all three of us on this call, have been at that place at some stage, and we've had to work through it.
Yeah, I feel like I still can be in that place. I feel like it's a bit like we're sort of laughing about the imposter syndrome, but that is like a branch of that negative messaging that I've internalized. What I try and do now is I accept that's part of who I am at the moment. It might not, when I'm 60, it might not be. I might have belief in some ways.
Yeah.
You know, you make room for these things, you know. Some things I've got a shut room in my mind. I never go in there. It's there. I know I never go in there. Sometimes I feel like there are things banging on the door to come out, and that's scary. But yeah, I think that for me, I'm only talking about me and I'm not giving any advice to anybody, but I think for me that is part of me. I just have to accept it. It's like a scar on my body. It's just there. But it isn't me. It's just a little part of me. And that's really helpful for me. And sometimes I have to maybe repeat that as a bit of a mantra. You know, it's not like a natural, it's a practice. It's like a daily practice almost, isn't it? Keep yourself well as well as you can be. And also to accept sometimes I am not well. I'm not my best.
And it's okay.
Yeah,
Beverley.
And that analogy of the scar is so prolific. And when you said that, I was like, wow, yes, because if it was harm that was physical in that way and there was a scar, people see that, understand it, just, you know, or ask questions. But a lot of the harm that we're talking about is unseen. It's hidden away. It is in that box.
Yeah, that's so true. I can remember my dad, when he was drunk, he would be really, really verbally abusive towards me, just me. He had 3 kids and it was just me. And he would ring me drunk and he would just shout and swear and call me horrendous names down the phone. And I can remember wishing he'd hit me instead, wishing that someone could see what he was doing to me. And it's that kind of emotional abuse is unseen, isn't it? And then because he was drunk, he would do this massive, it never happened. He would just deny it happened as if I was making it up. And those things, so it's not the abuse itself, but then there's the kind of minimization is just so harmful. You know, we call it gaslighting now, don't we?
I was going to say it's denial and gaslighting, isn't it?
But then that just leaves it with you and there's no evidence. I used to think, God, I wish you just punched me in the face so people knew what you were doing to me. So I would get some support and sympathy. So yeah, and I think that's the same thing, isn't it? It's like the hidden stuff is, I think sometimes it's much harder to deal with sometimes because there's no
people
proof.
Can't see how much you're hurting.
Yeah. And then you're also with other siblings, if he's not doing that to other siblings, their experience is so different.
Yeah.
You know, and the relationship is so different and, you know, the dynamics completely change.
Yeah. And it fed into that narrative I had going on inside that I developed as a child. It's something about me. There's just something there's something bad in me. It's like a magnet to other people's badness. That's what I used to think. And that was kind of reiterated because it wasn't like that with my siblings. They had different experience.
So as you came into adulthood and you were starting, because we all go through that, right, I'm going to change. That's it. I'm in control now. I'm going to drive forward. Not that we consciously realise it, and we use our survival skills in our adult life. Where was your first step into the area that you're in now?
Oh gosh. I think it came through a sense of injustice, actually. And a kind of always wanting to be on the underdog side. And that's the language I used then. I wouldn't use it now. I have better words for it now. But I left home as soon as I possibly could. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I kind of just did loads of waitressing, traveling, bar jobs. And I was just fueled by fury for about, I'd say, a good 3 or 4 years, and quite self-destructive. And then I kind of knew, and I think I started to realize that I wasn't okay because I could see some of the things I was doing, which were dangerous. And my sister would be trying to stop me doing these really dangerous things where I actually did. I'm not victim blaming. I actually did I sought it out because I needed some kind of, I don't know, danger to be hurt again. I don't know what that was. I can't really go into that with the kids. But I then, because I was doing that, I started thinking about a little bit about why, but not so much about, not in a particularly introspective way, but just sort of thinking that I needed help. So I started working at Mind. And I do think a lot of people, and I was definitely one of them, start working this was voluntary work as well, start working like a mental health or a counselling. I started doing a counselling course, and really, I just wanted someone to help me, but I didn't know that at the time. But actually doing that was really, really, I mean, it was tough actually, but it was really enlightening and empowering, because I started to just see, I'd put like such a wall up about what had gone on with me and how it affected me, because I was just told I wasn't supposed to have any of those feelings, because nothing had really happened after all. And if it did, it was my fault, that kind of messaging. So I started going to Mind, and I was helping other people with some serious, I was trying to support them and learning how to do that. And then I moved into wanting to become, I'd always wanted to be a teacher. And I just never believed that I would, one, clever enough, or I would just be rubbish at it, because I'd be rubbish at everything. That is how I thought. Anyway, I started moving towards that. I started working with young people. I was trying to do my counselling. And then gradually I just sort of built up a bit of confidence that maybe actually I could be quite good at this. Maybe I could be helpful to other people. And it stopped being as much about me as in the way it was at the beginning, and it started moving into something else. So then I sort of started working with adults with learning disabilities, as a residential support worker for them for, God, about 2 years. I was doing that while I was doing my first degree, actually. And I was still working with people with mental health struggles and issues. And then I started moving towards working with children and young people. So I got a job at Bernardo's. So I don't think I had one first step. It was a bit of a process, and that's how it kind of started.
But it's so typical, Tree, of many of our journeys. We sort of like want to do different, want to understand what's going on for ourselves, but we're not actually conscious of it. We do it all unconscious, and we follow this journey of wanting to help other people, but at the same time we're sorting ourselves out. It is really interesting that we've all had different journeys, but it seems to be quite a similar undercurrent of what's going on. And then when you're faced with, oh, actually, that happened to me, and that's how I've been impacted, and I've got a right to feel like this, and now this is what I'm going to do. It is really astonishing, and to see how it's all unpicking.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I don't know.
So we heard a quick overview about your study, but if we take you back, so you got your PGCE and you started teaching. Where did you start teaching?
I started teaching in West Yorkshire in big secondary school. I started my training in Bradford, actually, and before that I was a learning mentor in Bradford, and that was hard. That was a hard school with loads of really awful issues going on. But one of the biggest things I saw was misogyny, and this was like, God, maybe the 1990? No, it can't be. No, sorry, 98, 99, 2000. That was before I had my daughter. So yeah, and in that I saw a lot of girls, children being sexually exploited. And I can remember taking it to the head of safeguarding at the time, because I worked with all, like, they called them the marginalised kids or the school refusers, and that was who I worked with. And did a lot of kind of assertiveness, self-esteem work with them, really, really intense, really slow work. And it was I know it was really good work. I can remember, lots of girls started talking to me about their boyfriends who were in their 20s or 30s. We had a girl who was pregnant at 13, and it was all safeguarding then, child protection sort of stuff. I went to the head of child protection and said, I think this girl is being abused. I think she's being sexually abused. It's like she's in a domestically abusive relationship. I don't know what to do, and I just felt it was way beyond my skill set or knowledge. And he just said, oh, she's a slut. And I still remember that, like, viscerally today. It makes me want to cry and scream at the same time. And I can remember I was so speechless that he'd said this about a child, which is a slut. And what that one word is so impactful. It meant actually, so we're not going to help her. She's not deserving of any help. There's something a little bit wrong for you for not realizing that she's a slut. And I was just in this system, and I just carried on. I carried on, like, using my voice and supporting this girl. as best I could in a system that did not want to support her. And actually, she wasn't the only one. That was just the worst and most impactful case for me. And I supported a girl who'd been gang raped when she was 15 years old. And I supported her all through the court. And she'd lied. She'd done a tiny lie. And she'd lied because she said they dragged her into a car. And actually, she got into the car willingly because she didn't know she was about to be raped.
Yeah.
And so the CPS didn't find in her favour. And those two things in those 2 years were absolutely pivotal for me. And it just ignited, I call it my feminist rage. It ignited this rage that this is not an opinion.
Yeah.
This is not what someone thinks. This is actually what is happening in our education and our legal system to young girls, to children. And I've got goose pimples even now thinking about it. It just still infuriates me because I don't think we're that far on. We are a little bit on. I don't want to be negative about it, but I know that's still happening, that kind of stuff.
100%.
So you said like first step, that I think that bit was like the most pivotal for me. And after that, I just became, I really started educating myself better, because no one else was, really raising it all the time, and actually really annoying people, which I was like, why am I annoying people? It's
Yeah.
again, like I suddenly put into that,
Yeah.
loudmouth woman. But I had some training, because I think I said earlier, when I was a teenager, I was out to agitate purposefully. So I kind of brought that part of myself alive, I guess. And I tried to do all the things I could in terms of changing the school and changing the policy and practice. And I did have some success, but not loads, because no one else really cared. There was a couple of people who did. And also just trying to support, just trying to give, I talk a lot about counter narratives, and I think that's really important to me, because I know, narratives about the stories we're told, the things we're told we're growing up. And I wanted to tell those girls a different story about themselves. So yeah, I think that was probably the most impactful. I don't even know if I've answered your question, Beverley Ann.
No, you have, and it's intriguing sitting here, and there's loads of things we want to ask, but we don't want to interrupt, and that's
Sorry.
That's not natural for Chris and I promise you. So, I mean, as I'm sitting here, I can feel that anger, because we can all, it's ping, ping, ping. It's light bulb moments for so many of us. And let's be frank, we still see it in the media. And I know I say this a lot, but the media messages reflect a lot of people's thoughts, because they read those headlines. They continue to follow those, maybe it's a newspaper or programs, channels, etc., with that messaging. So sadly, we haven't moved on near as far as much as we should and can do. We have in some areas, but not in any others. But before I get on my soapbox even more, this is about you, Theresa. So following the school then, what was your next step in your journey?
Well, then I took a year out and went to live in Ecuador with my daughter and husband. And then that was great. And we volunteered to teach English in a school in this tiny village. And that was a bit of I don't know what I want to do with my life. It was a bit like, do I have another child? My daughter was 3 at the time. Do I try to find a career? And I wanted to become a teacher. And it was like, I know people just like, oh God, I'm just going to train to be a teacher. It was like such a big, scary decision for me, because I was so scared of failing, I think. But anyway, I took the leap of faith and came back and trained to be a teacher then. And then I became a social sciences and what's it called? I left teaching 14 years ago. PSHE, physical citizenship as well. So I was a subject specialist in sort of sociology, psychology, and those things. And then, so then I just worked in the school for 12 years, and that was great. And I did a lot of work around sort of feminist groups, and again, sort of carried on that kind of self-esteem stuff when I could, because the timetable was so hard. And then I had a pastoral role for, I think, about the last 5 years, where I was just supporting mainly sixth formers actually, so 16 to 18-year-olds with mental health issues, eating disorders, self-harming, domestic abuse, child sexual abuse, yeah, and signposting in that way, and supporting, and like working with CAMs and, you know, educational psychologists.
Tree, can I just ask at this point, often when you're in a professional capacity, a professional role, it's frowned upon by especially professional bodies for you to bring into any kind of conversation your lived experience, because you're meant to keep yourself separate, boundaried, da 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 da. But in my experience, the minute you share that you're a human being and you've gone through a similar lived experience to the cohort of people that you're working with, there is this, oh, she's walked in my shoes, he's walked in my shoes, so therefore there's almost an automatic level of being in tune, trust, connection, all of that. So for me, it's I like the fact that I've walked the walk, I talk the talk, I'm on their level, there's no hierarchy between me and them. I'm here to help them, they're here to make me learn. There's that that goes on. What are your thoughts about all of that? Professional boundaries.
I think it's about, like, I am a professional and I am boundaried, but I have and will, and I definitely will continue to share personal experience. And I think it's about how you do that. So I can remember working, you know, with 14, 15-year-old girls, and, you know, I did see myself in them. And it's not because it's about me. It's about using that experience and being able to say, look, you know, I actually do know what this is like. When I was 15, this thing happened to me, full stop.
Yeah.
I don't go on about the trauma or anything else.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
happened to me. And I know how hard it is. And I think the thing is, it's about empathy and connection. And when you're working with vulnerability, when people are always vulnerable, you know, being able to develop that empathy is about developing connection, which develops trust, which develops connection. And that's how you support people, I think, in the most meaningful way. You know, I can say, right, here's a leaflet and you go to this service, they can help. I can do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all I can do, and that's frustrating. But actually, there are many, many times, there's been many, many times in my professional life, in my different roles, I've had so many different roles, where I have, and I believe it was the absolute right thing to do, because that child trusts me then. And when a child who has been harmed in whatever way trusts an adult, that is a gift to that child. And I think that's 100%. Really, really important. So, and I still do. I do it professionally now. I'm constantly sharing about myself. I'm a bit of an oversharer, but I am bounded about it. You know, I'm not going to, I choose what I want to say, but that's a really important thing for me to do. This is a bit of a separate issue with young people, but you know, it's about being a professional with lived experience. It's like, I am a professional with lived experience of sexual violence that started in childhood and has continued throughout my life. It only stopped probably when I got past maybe 40, when I'm not quite so as attractive as women ought to be, and all that kind of stuff that goes on, which is another form of sexism. But anyway, don't get me on that. But yeah, so I do think it's really important to be able to say all those things, because, and you talk about, Chris, you talk a lot about being your authentic self, and that's been really powerful for me, like being my authentic self. The first thing I think, well, what is my authentic self? What are the words I need to use? What words fit me and my authentic self? Because for a long time, I haven't known. I've not called myself a survivor until like the last 4 years, 5 years. I have not used that word about myself because I didn't think I was worthy, because other people had worse things. And now I know that's not true now, but you know, I felt like I didn't fit. So kind of reclaiming those words for myself personally, and other people do it in their own different ways. But and I will do it at work. I'm doing it at work. You know, I've done presentations around, you know, what is the impact of researching sexual violence when you've been a victim of it? That's really important. And actually what I'm finding is people are bloody interested.
Because there's many people.
because many people, and I'm not making an assumption or
No.
a prediction, but many people who work in this space either have their own personal experience or someone they love.
Yeah.
You know, and we know how prevalent sexual violence is and child sexual abuse is. We know that. So my assumption is that most people will have had some form of it.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that. And yeah, I was going to go on to being a mother then, but I'll stop.
Yeah. Don't overshare, just because, yeah. But, you know, Beverley and I have done podcasts on being pregnant, going through childbirth, being a mum, and all of that, because it was really important for us to do that as a podcast, because many victim and survivors don't understand the impact, because they don't know about it. They don't know about trauma. They don't know that their symptoms that they're living with on a day-to-day basis is because of the abnormal experiences they've been through. So we really wanted to highlight that and bring that to life. Now, with that in mind, are you able to share with us, if you want to, the impact of the trauma in your life, like maybe on your mental health, on your physical health, anything that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think that it's impact work, you know, when you're working with children who are being sexually abused, that impacts on you. I don't think I think there was like a disconnect when I was doing that work, which was quite a while ago now, like the direct frontline work. I had to move away from it. But I think when I was doing it, there was a disconnect. Oh, this is because this happened to me. It's like I knew it had, but I didn't have an emotional response, and it was all in that room I told you about.
Yeah.
It was when I started working at the inquiry, actually. So that was only 2019, and being an assistant facilitator for the Truth Project, when I started hearing all these different stories. And when you're in part of the research team, what we were doing was reading the transcripts or listening to the audios of Truth Project sessions where people came sometimes for the first time in their entire life and disclosed this often the most horrific child sexual abuse. And that kind of, I used to say it broke me. I don't think it did. I think it blew the top off. It blew the door out of my private locked room.
Yeah.
And that's when it really started impacting on me, because that stuff was out. And I think I probably had a bit of a PTSD kind of response for a while. And I really struggled and I asked for help and didn't really get it readily. I had to really search it out. And that was at the inquiry, which was brilliant in lots of ways. And I've just managed to find a couple of people who helped me and supported me, but they weren't supposed to. It wasn't their job. They were doing it because they were really good at their job and saw that I was struggling. The response I actually got from, you know, my manager at the time was that, well, maybe you can't do this job then. You know, so maybe the problem is you again, which again was quite a traumatic thing to hear. Like, oh, it's me. It's because I'm shit. Oh God, it's all that. So that was all triggered. So that was really difficult. And then I got COVID, and I have a theory that I was kind of in this sort of trauma explosion of things that had been really suppressed, and I got ill. And I was ill for about 3 weeks with COVID, but then I carried on getting ill, and I still carried on getting ill. And that kind of developed into different diagnoses of long COVID, and then long COVID, ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, triggered by long COVID. And so where I am now, so this is an impact. It has impacted physically on my body.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a coincidence that happened.
No, it's not.
These three things came together literally at the same time, within the same few months. I can remember I was having some trauma-informed CBT, and it was just giving me EMDR actually, which I really rate. I've had it twice. It's been really good.
So do I. Yeah.
But I had this session, and we're talking about a particular thing that I'd never spoken about before. I'd never named. I had a tremendous amount of shame, and I had the session, and I don't know, I can't remember now, but maybe a few days, maybe a week, I broke out in shingles.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. And then I kept recurring shingles every time, you know. And I know now that there is this, you know, people talk about the mind-body link, and I was a bit like, it's just like over there for me. Anyway, it's become my orbit. So there is that kind of, so an impact on the work, I think, has, the impact of the work is that it's triggered, it's reharnessed, it's reignited. I don't know what the word is, my own stuff, which I now have to work through.
Yeah.
And that's hard when you don't feel physically great. And also when you know that doing that seems to make you like physically ill. And like I had like swollen glands, I had shingles on my face, had nail bed infections. So it was all my immune system. So, and it's over and over again. So that's been the last 4 years really. So I think that the work, my own experiences, and an external physical virus has just kind of put me on a different path of recovery.
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%.
Which I never saw coming. I didn't want.
No.
Don't like.
Don't want, go away.
But I'm also, to give you another side of that. So as a trauma recovery practitioner, and I specialise in chronic fatigue, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, our body is amazing because our body comes in our physicality, but neurologically in our mind. Because when we say, you know, mental, I think some people think, oh, it's just in our head, and it's not. It's our brain is amazing in the messaging. And the physical impact is when sometimes we're unable to vocalize what we actually want to say. So we've suppressed the emotions from when we're younger. We've suppressed them from when we're teenagers. And now we're seeing all these other people, and it's like, I can't get these words out. And our body's saying, I'm ready to vocalize. Not necessarily go back to each and every traumatic experience, but I'm ready to, as a young girl, I want to say this. As a teenager, I'm going to be angry because I want to be, and it's okay. And it's the fear that stops us.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go much into it because I could be here all day talking about it because it's my passion.
Podcasts as well.
Yeah, done it in other podcasts, but I've also been there myself. Yeah. I've had the physical impact. So has Chris as well. So it's really good to hear this, and thank you for sharing that, because it's so important for our listeners and watchers to know, wow, someone will be sitting there going, I'm normal.
Yeah. That is really important. It's really important.
It is.
I did a lot of somatic therapy last year, actually, because I knew that I was dissociated from my body in lots of, and that manifests in lots of different ways. And, you know, when I was saying when I went out and sought danger, it's because, and I know that that was a real issue around this dissociation, which I didn't know that word at that time,
no.
20 or something. So I think like for me, like being educated, and I don't mean formally, I mean educated by listening to people who know what they're talking about, listening to people with lived experience is educational. It teaches us something. It teaches us to use the words that those people are using, and that's really important. And I think just to go back to research, that's the kind of research I do. I do research with people who are at the heart of that issue. I'm a feminist researcher. A feminist research value is about what is the hidden life, usually women. What is that, and how do we elevate that? How do we learn from it? How do we put that into practice and policy? And that's like a big part of, and I think that's how I'm trying to channel it now. And I can't do as much as I want to do. I don't have the energy I want to have, but that's kind of the focus of what I'm trying to do now, because I can't do direct work anymore. I can't handle it. I struggle reading some stuff. I struggle hearing some stuff. I have to switch a lot of things off. And I'm trying to be really compassionate to myself. Like, this is just what you need to do now.
Absolutely.
What you need to do now. And you don't know what's going to come on, and you don't know what's next. Look, this is what I just need to do now. And I just need to take care of myself.
Self-care.
And just do the bits I can do. Yeah. Which is why like, the researcher wellbeing work I'm doing is really important as well.
But that's the strength within you that recognizes what you need now to get you through this bit, so you can carry on doing what it is you're good at, and how you can help more people in the future. So it's really important to take this pause and understand that it is just an episode, and as you said, fundamentally and profoundly you are okay, but it's these three things that collided that caused this eruption where you find yourself now, and that when you move through at your pace, it is going to be all okay, and you're going to be stronger, fitter, and fighting the cause again, whatever that happens to be. And I think that the cognition of this, many people do not even get to that place of having the cognition of what is actually happening to them, that the symptoms they're living with on a day-to-day basis is as a result and because of the harm that was caused to them. Many of us will live in that survival mode forever and a day, not knowing that that is what it is. And for me, back in 2000, 2001 is when I had my mental health slide and when I had my breakdown at work, and then led to me doing that 20 years of recovery and the journey that I'm still on, that we're all talking about. And I think it's really important that professionals, because many of us end up being professional in whatever profession it is we've chosen to do, that we can all be impacted at any time.
Exactly, yeah.
Different episodes throughout our lives, and that's what we've spoken about a lot, Bev, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it's also making sure we don't heap any more shame on ourselves, like, come on, why are you like this? What you know, that's been done, gone. You've come out of that, so why is this now upsetting the apple cart? Why are you like this now? And making sure that the people around us don't heap any of that onto us as well. And, you know, having the strength to go, hang on a minute, can you just hold off there? Yes, I want to be involved in that and that, but right now it has to be about me and my own oxygen mask. It has to. Absolutely.
And I think what you're saying about shame, I think shame has been, and again, this is something I've named in the last 5 years. There's a woman called Carolyn Spring. She does a lot. I love her work. And my friend put me onto her, and, you know, she's got a book called Unshamed, and she talks about shame. And like, as I was it is like, you know, oh my God, this is me. That's what this thing is, you know, the shame of it, the sense of just being a failure. I can't even be a human being. I don't know how to be a girl because I don't want to be the girl everyone's telling me I have to be. I don't want to wear those clothes and look like that. I don't want to do any of those things. So shame has been massive. And I think when I realized that, that's when I made a decision as well, that I had to start talking about myself as having lived experience, talking about experiences of sexual violence. I had 4 very serious sexual assaults, separate ones, by the time I was 18, and countless less serious but also harmful. I'm the mother of a daughter who's had 2 serious sexual assaults against her, you know, and just talking about, so I've talked a lot about her. I think I want to talk a bit about mothering a girl in this world is, as when you've got lived experience as well. It's probably a whole other podcast, but
it is.
And I have to say, we've got 5 minutes.
Okay,
so can we hold that thought? Because
yes,
Theresa,
we can.
you know,
we can revisit that as a whole podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, because so important. So Theresa, as I said, we have only got 5 minutes. So really sorry it's coming to an end. And that's the best thing about having guests, because we love having our guests back, don't we, Chris?
Yes, yeah.
Because, you know, you bring so much. And but we mentioned very quickly, and right at the beginning, Chris mentioned IPPRI, International Policing and Public Protection Research Institute.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Where does that come in your timeline?
This, you know, I'm not saying this because I hope my boss is going to be watching, but this has been the best job I've ever had. I feel like this job was made for me. So from a very personal perspective, and I didn't think I'd get it, obviously, because I'm just rubbish. Anyway, I got it.
Which you're not.
I know, but the message is you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
But actually, again, I was so relaxed. I thought, well, I'm not going to get it. I think that might have helped. But yeah, so we do work, and we do a lot of work around child sexual abuse and exploitation, globally, internationally, and locally. We do a lot of work around extremism. We just do a lot of work with the police, but not solely with the police, but all of our work is trying to be, in academia they call it impact focus, but actually in my mind it's, I want to do something that makes a difference, and that's the research we do, and the differences can be quite small. but I think those little changes start to add up, and we've had some really big work as well. So I think for me, it's where I want to be, and I have a sense that when I look back, it's where I was heading but didn't know. Like, I don't want to do anything else now. This is it. And my only ambition, I guess, is to do the best work that I can do here, in this role. But yeah, that's where it is for me. It's a little bit personally attached to it. I feel like it's a culmination of it's like, yeah, it's a culmination of where I need to be right now.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic.
Working with wonderful, wonderful people, inspirational people.
Well, I think it's fair to say I get inspiration from lots of different people. I know we all do. You mentioned about IPPPRI. Obviously, you've worked with Chris on IPPPRI and the Truth Project. Chris and I both shared our story, and I was one of them. I shared about one abuser, but it was the first time I'd actually mentioned about the other abuser. So, you know, and lots of respect for everyone involved.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we will continue to beat that drum. So, and we've got other podcasts about that. Chris, any last thoughts for you?
We never know where these conversations are going to go, do we? So we always have like a set lot of questions, because it when we ask those questions, it just goes off wherever it goes, and we try and give our guests the freedom to share, and then we come in and share, and it just opens up the conversation into so many different ways, and that's where the power is for us in our recovery, and that's where we all learn, and we all understand that, you know what, this harm that was caused to us and the impact that we live with, we don't deserve it. It's not ours. We should be giving it back to the people that are causing the harm. But as we spoke with John earlier in our other podcast, it's about the bigger picture, and Tree is part of that bigger picture in the research that she's doing. So we need to come back in our second podcast and speak about all of that. So stay tuned, people. We're going to be talking about mothering with Tree. We're going to be talking about feminism, and we're going to be talking about the research and the bigger picture. So much is going on in my brain at the moment, Bev. So that's my last word. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Theresa.
Thank you both. I was nervous, but thank you. It's been lovely. And you do, this is great. This podcast is great.
Thank you.
We're really privileged to be part of it.
Thank you. And we feel privileged to be able to create this platform too.
Yes,
so anyone listening or watching, you know, any questions, anything that you would like to ask us, you know, any information, even for signposting, anything, feel free to either comment underneath if you're watching us on YouTube, or email us at breakingthecycle2stepforward@gmail.com. And if there's any subject that you'd like us to cover, because, you know, we're open to hearing from you and finding out what you want to hear about too. So thank you once again, Theresa. Thank you, Chris. And it's goodbye from all of us.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take
See you for part 2.
Bye-bye.